February 20th, 1943, just north of Kasserine Pass in Tunisia. Official reports of the battle never truly described what German tank commanders saw that morning. American Sherman tanks were moving in a way that went against everything German doctrine claimed was possible, without direct visual signals. Through thick dust and smoke on the North African battlefield, 5 Sherman tanks, spread across broken terrain with no line of sight, closed in on German positions as though they were connected by some invisible force. No signal flags, no flare guns, no messengers darting between vehicles. Yet they moved with perfect timing, each tank covering gaps the others couldn't see. Every crew seemed to know exactly where their fellow Shermans were at all times, and their Panzer IV equipped with few G5 radios. German commanders struggled to even hear their own leaders. Static drowned out orders on their amplitude modulation systems. Their 10-watt transmitters, which had been advanced technology in the 1930s, could barely cover a few hundred meters once the tank started moving. Most German vehicles had only receivers, meaning they could listen, but not report what they saw or call for support. The Americans, on the other hand, had something the Germans had never even imagined: frequency modulation radios in every single tank. With crystal-controlled accuracy, 25 watts of power, and transmissions that sliced through engine noise and battlefield chaos, these radios gave U.S. crews a level of coordination the Wehrmacht simply couldn't match. From Detroit's assembly lines came one of World War II's most decisive advantages. Not thicker armor or larger cannons, but the invisible electromagnetic waves that allowed American tank crews to fight as one unified force. This transformation began on July 22, 1941, when the U.S. Army standardized the Signal Corps radio sets SCR-508, SCR-528, and SCR-538 for all medium tanks. At the same time that German forces were storming into the Soviet Union relying on AM radios, American engineers at the Galvin Manufacturing Company, later renamed Motorola, were finalizing FM technology that would leave German systems outdated overnight. Key figures like Daniel E. Noble, who first envisioned FM for combat vehicles, and Henryk Magnuski, the chief RF engineer, overcame enormous technical hurdles to make it work inside armored tanks. The final product weighed 181 pounds and effectively turned every Sherman into a node in the world's first battlefield-wide communication network. The BC-604 transmitter delivered 25 watts, more than twice the power of the German Fuji-5, operating between 20, 0 and 27. 9 MHz. It offered 10 preset crystal-stable channels. Its companion, the dual BC-603 receivers in the SCR-508, allowed commanders to monitor multiple channels at once, an ability that changed combat dynamics entirely. But the real breakthrough wasn't just in power, it was in FM itself. Edwin Armstrong's frequency modulation, licensed to the military, removed the static and background noise that crippled AM systems. While German crews heard endless interference from electrical sparks, engines, and moving tracks, U.S. tankers heard voices come through sharp and clear, even under artillery bombardment. The first true test came on November 8, 1942, when American forces launched Operation Torch. As tanks from the 2nd Armored Division landed near Safi and Fadala, they carried SCR-508 radios that would soon prove their worth against the battle-hardened Afrika Korps. Despite being the Wehrmacht's most experienced armored force, the Afrika Korps fought under severe communication restrictions. A standard German tank platoon of 5 vehicles usually had just 1 or 2 tanks with full Fuji-5 transceivers, capable of both sending and receiving. The rest carried Fuji-2 receivers only. These crews could hear orders but couldn't reply or report enemy activity. German platoons worked under strict hierarchy, with the leader transmitting instructions that subordinates obeyed without speaking back. The system fell apart when command tanks, easy to identify by their extra antennas, were destroyed. Entire platoons then lost coordination instantly. Against U.S. forces, this weakness became deadly. Since every American tank carried a full radio set, any Sherman could take over leadership at a moment's notice. The Battle of Kasserine Pass from February 14th to 24th, 1943, gave the first large-scale demonstration of America's radio advantage. While tactically a German success, the engagement shocked German observers. In the midst of chaotic fighting, scattered units from the U.S. 1st Armored Division coordinated across a 50-mile battlefield. Tank crews who had never trained together shared warnings, launched joint attacks, and called down artillery strikes using their FM radios. German signals intelligence intercepted these communications and was stunned by their clarity. Reports from the 10th Panzer Division's intelligence unit admitted that American transmissions stayed strong over ranges where German radios produced only static. Even more alarming was the discovery that every American tank could transmit, not just the command vehicles. Meanwhile, German Fuji-5 radios operating between 27.0 and 33.3 MHz were crippled by AM's natural flaws. Their 10-watt transmitters barely managed 2 to 3 kilometers under perfect conditions, dropping to just a few hundred meters once tanks started moving. Every electrical spark, every engine cycle, every track movement created interference AM couldn't filter out. By September 1943, American armor entered Italy, where rugged mountains should have erased radio effectiveness. Instead, FM proved even more valuable. The SCR-508 handled echoes and multipath interference in valleys with ease, while German AM radios became almost useless. This was the hidden edge of the Sherman, not just steel and firepower, but a battlefield network that let American crews fight as a unified, flexible force. The Germans, despite their engineering skill, never caught up to the invisible revolution taking place over the airwaves. American tanks proved their advantage in terrain where visual signals were impossible and German radios failed entirely during the advance toward Cassino. U.S. armored units carried out maneuvers that the Germans simply could not understand. Tank platoons separated by ridgelines were still able to coordinate attacks with precision, even though German doctrine insisted such coordination was only possible with direct visual contact. Reports from the 1st Armored Division described this kind of long-range cooperation as routine, taking place at distances where German radios could transmit nothing but static. On June 6, 1944, as Sherman tanks rolled off landing craft on the beaches of Normandy, their SCR-508 radios stayed in constant communication with naval gunfire support. This kind of coordination was impossible for German technology at the time. Yet the fighting in the Normandy hedgerows quickly exposed a serious flaw. Tank radios could not talk directly to infantry radios because they operated on different frequencies. The infantry used the SCR-300, which ran on the 40.0 to 48.0 MHz range, while tanks operated between 20.0 and 27.9 MHz. The result was a deadly communication gap. In the Bocage countryside, German infantry armed with Panzerfausts could sneak close to American tanks, while nearby U.S. infantry had no direct way to warn them. The Americans solved this problem in just a few weeks. Tank crews began mounting EE-8 field telephones inside ammunition boxes welded to the exterior of their vehicles. These phones were wired directly into the tank's internal system. By the time Operation Cobra began in late July, this simple innovation had completely transformed tank infantry cooperation. Between July 25th and July 30th, 1944, during Operation Cobra, the 2nd Armored Division, under the command of Major General Edward H. Brooks, coordinated over 200 Sherman tanks through interconnected radio networks. This gave American forces an unprecedented level of battlefield control. German defenders from the Panzer Lehr Division faced an enemy that seemed to react instantly, as if they had supernatural awareness. American tank crews could respond within minutes to threats reported by units miles away, and artillery fire was coordinated through tank radios with incredible speed. The contrast with German forces was striking. The Panzer Lehr Division, once the pride of Germany's armored forces, was reduced to what soldiers themselves described as communication poverty. Most of their tanks operated without radios at all, relying instead on hand signals and visual cues, methods that were useless in the broken terrain of Normandy, where visibility was often less than 100 meters. The few radios they did have suffered from interference and limited range, making true coordination nearly impossible. The irony was that Germany had been the pioneer of radio and armored warfare. General Heinz Guderian, the father of Blitzkrieg, had insisted on equipping tanks with radios since the 1920s. In his 1937 book Achtung Panzer, he emphasized that communication was the key to effective armored operations. His early doctrine relied heavily on tank radios to coordinate fast-moving attacks. Yet by 1943, Germany's own tank production could no longer meet the demands of his vision. German production statistics made the problem clear. In 1943, Germany built around 5,700 medium tanks but produced fewer than 2,000 Fuji transceivers. Most of those radios went into command vehicles and assault guns, leaving ordinary tanks with little or no communication equipment. Soviet tank forces faced an even worse shortage. The T-34, although it was the most produced Allied tank of the war, usually went into battle without any radio at all. Soviet doctrine depended on flag signals and rigid pre-battle planning, methods that proved disastrous against German forces in 1941. By 1943, Lend-Lease shipments brought some relief. American radios, including SCR-508 sets, were installed in Soviet command tanks. Even so, by the end of the war, only about 25% of Soviet tanks had radios. This contrast highlighted just how far ahead the Americans were. While the Soviet Union struggled to provide radios to 1/4 of its tanks, the United States equipped 100% of its armored vehicles with advanced FM communication systems. Motorola's factory in Chicago symbolized this industrial achievement. Before the war, the company had specialized in car radios. Switching to military production required a complete retooling process and solving brand new technical challenges. Each SCR-508 set contained 2,148 separate components, all of which had to meet extremely precise standards. Inside the BC-604 transmitter alone were 474 capacitors and 385 resistors. The crystal oscillators had to remain stable under combat conditions, enduring vibration and extreme temperatures without drifting off frequency. The scale of production was staggering. In 1942, 3,800 SCR-508 family radios were built. In 1943, that number jumped to 11,400. By 1944, production reached 24,000 units, bringing total wartime output to more than 50,000 radio sets. This ensured that all 49,324 Sherman tanks produced during the war came off the line fully equipped with modern communication equipment, something no other nation accomplished. But the SCR-508's advantages were not limited to FM clarity alone. Its crystal-controlled channels allowed tanks to preset frequencies before battle, maintaining stability throughout combat. German Fuji 5 radios, which relied on variable capacitor tuning, constantly drifted off frequency under stress. The American system's dual receiver setup let commanders monitor both their platoon's channel and the higher company command channel at the same time. This meant orders flowed instantly down the chain of command, while commanders still kept track of what their subordinates were reporting. Inside the tank, the BC-606 intercom system tied directly into the radio, so every crew member could immediately alert the commander about threats. Crews used throat microphones and noise-canceling headsets, which allowed them to communicate clearly despite engine roar, gunfire, and explosions all around them. This integration of radios, intercoms, and industrial-scale production gave American tanks a decisive edge, an invisible advantage that shaped the outcome of armored battles across Europe. Many German tanks went into battle without intercom systems, leaving crews to shout at each other or rely on touch-to-pass commands. By contrast, American tanks had a big edge in power management and electrical clarity. The SCR-508 radio system could run on either 12 or 24 volts, automatically adjusting to whatever power was available. Its dynamotor supply delivered stable, filtered electricity that cut out static. German radios, which drew power directly from their vehicle systems, picked up every electrical spark as background noise. The real strength of universal radio equipment was how it reshaped American armored doctrine. The U.S. Army's combat command structure, task forces tailored for specific missions, was only possible because every tank could reliably communicate. Commanders could mix units together, confident they would stay connected through standard FM radios. German officers locked into rigid formations were baffled by this flexibility. Their own limited communications made such improvisation impossible. This difference became obvious in September 1944 during the Battle of Erricourt. The U.S. 4th Armored Division faced several German Panzer brigades equipped with superior Panther tanks. On paper, the Germans had every advantage in armor and firepower. But American coordination proved decisive. Sherman crews instantly reported enemy movements by radio. Tank destroyers received targeting data from tanks they couldn't even see. Forward observers in command Shermans directed devastating artillery fire within minutes. The results spoke for themselves. Over 3 weeks, the 4th Armored Division destroyed 281 German armored vehicles, while losing only 41 Shermans, a kill ratio of 7-1 that defied the technical comparison of the two tanks. Yet German intelligence never truly understood the American advantage. Reports noted U.S. coordination, but assumed it came from training, not technology. A captured assessment from September 1944 even stated, "American tank units demonstrate good radio discipline and coordination. This appears to result from extensive training and rigid communication procedures." The report completely missed the role of frequency modulation radios. Because of this, German tactics failed to adapt. They kept targeting so-called command tanks identified by their antennas, not realizing that every Sherman had the ability to direct and coordinate. They planned ambushes under the assumption that U.S. units would fall apart when separated, never grasping that radio contact kept American platoons organized even without visual signals. By March 1945, as U.S. forces advanced toward the Rhine, American communication superiority reached its peak. The capture of the Remagen Bridge showed how fast U.S. command systems could react. When the 9th Armored Division found the Ludendorff Bridge intact, reports traveled by radio to 1st Army headquarters within minutes. Within an hour, entire divisions were being redirected to exploit the opportunity. German forces, dependent on landline telephones constantly destroyed by Allied aircraft, could not respond at the same speed. American radios created a shield around the bridgehead. Tank platoons from different battalions merged into a seamless defense, coordinating fire through shared networks. German counterattacks, poorly timed and lacking communication, arrived piecemeal and were broken apart one after another. In April 1945, the encirclement of the Ruhr pocket marked the full realization of U.S. communication dominance. Armored columns from both the 1st and 9th Armies executed a complex double envelopment, almost entirely by radio. Inside the pocket, 325,000 German troops were trapped in part because their communications had collapsed. American fighter bombers, guided by forward air controllers using radios, systematically destroyed what was left of German networks. Wehrmacht units lost all links to higher headquarters and even to neighboring formations. Field Marshal Walter Model's final messages before his radios went silent told the story clearly. No contact with adjacent units. No communication with higher headquarters. Fighting continues, but coordination impossible. The psychological impact of this divide was enormous. American tank crews fought with the assurance that they were never alone. Even when physically cut off, they were still part of a larger network of tanks, artillery, and air support. German crews experienced the opposite, profound isolation. Without working radios, they fought as individuals inside battles far larger than they could comprehend. Otto Carius, one of Germany's most successful tank commanders, later wrote in his memoir Tigers in the Mud about the struggles caused by poor communication, though he focused mostly on battlefield tactics rather than the broader gap in technology. The consequences extended far beyond single engagements. The rapid American advances of 1944 and 1945 depended heavily on radio networks that allowed command and control across hundreds of miles. German leaders repeatedly underestimated U.S. mobility because they couldn't imagine a communication system that allowed such coordination. General Heinz Guderian, in his later role as Inspector General of Armored Troops, recognized the problem but had no solution. In a December 1944 memorandum, he admitted that American coordination through radios erased Germany's advantage in tank design and firepower. After Germany's surrender, American technical intelligence teams examined captured equipment. Their reports confirmed what battlefield experience had shown all along. German tanks often carried excellent armor and powerful guns, but their radios were disastrously outdated. U.S. Army Technical Intelligence Report number 176 concluded that German tank communication systems were about 5 years behind American technology. The lack of frequency modulation, the shortage of radios, and poor suppression of electrical interference created fatal weaknesses. Soviet evaluations after the war reached the same conclusion. The Red Army, after capturing large amounts of German equipment, made a key decision for its post-war development. Instead of copying German communication systems, they chose to base their designs on American radios. That choice highlights just how far ahead the United States was in this field. Production numbers tell the story clearly. The United States built 508,528,538 radios, with more than 50,000 units entering service. The M4 Sherman tank, produced in 49,124 units, had a radio installed in every single vehicle, giving it a 100% deployment rate. These radios delivered 25 watts of transmission power, used crystal-controlled frequency stability accurate to plus or minus 0.01%, and achieved a range of 7 miles while moving and 10 to 15 miles while stationary. Now compare this with Germany. Their standard Fuji 5 transceiver was built in only about 6,000 units, while German industry produced roughly 12,000 medium and heavy tanks. That meant only around 20% of their vehicles carried a proper transceiver. German radios transmitted at 10 watts, had unstable frequency control varying by plus or minus 1%, and managed a range of only 0.5 to 1 mile while moving, and 2 to 3 miles when stationary. The difference in performance was staggering. For example, an American artillery fire mission usually took just 3 to 5 minutes to call in and execute. A German fire mission, in contrast, often took 15 to 30 minutes. Every American tank could coordinate with its partners, while only 20% of German tanks could do the same. This American radio dominance shaped the future of warfare. Modern main battle tanks still carry advanced communication suites that can trace their routes directly back to the SCR-508. Although today's systems are digital rather than analog, the principle remains identical: universal radio deployment and reliable coordination. When West Germany rebuilt its military in the 1950s, the Bundeswehr placed communications at the heart of its doctrine, learning from World War II. Every Leopard tank was fitted with comprehensive radios. One Bundeswehr training manual even declared, "The defeat of superior German tanks by inferior American vehicles with superior radios proves that information dominance outweighs platform superiority." History has confirmed this again and again. In the 1991 Gulf War, coalition forces with advanced communications crushed Iraqi armored divisions that fielded individually strong Soviet-designed tanks, but had weak radios. In 2003, American forces showed once more that network-centered warfare beats platform-centered warfare. The superiority of Sherman tank radios represented a victory in the electromagnetic spectrum. German tank crews were essentially fighting blind to this hidden advantage, realizing too late that every Sherman wasn't just a tank. It was part of the world's first battlefield communication network. The SCR-508 radio turned the M4 Sherman from an average medium tank into a vital link in a much larger system. Its 181-pound radio set connected crews across the battlefield, allowing them to share information instantly. This collective intelligence was something no German tank, no matter how well armored or armed, could replicate. German forces learned this through hard defeats at Kasserine Pass in the hedgerows of France and in the desperate battles inside Germany itself. Their doctrine insisted that close coordination required visual contact. American tanks proved otherwise by coordinating perfectly through their radios. The Wehrmacht never developed an effective counter because it never understood the scale of the technological gap. A comment attributed to Field Marshal Wilhelm Keitel at the time of Germany's surrender summed it up well. "We knew how to build better tanks, but you knew how to make them work together." Whether this quote was exact or not, the truth behind it stands firm. America had not only built 49,324 Sherman tanks, but also 49,324 nodes in the first armored battlefield network in history. What military historians today call network-centric warfare actually began in 1942, when the first Sherman tank fitted with an SCR-508 rolled into combat. From that moment, the rules of modern warfare were rewritten. The side with better communications would defeat the side with better weapons. The network would defeat the platform. The connected would overcome the isolated. This revolution was invisible to most German commanders. They saw the Americans coordinating better but assumed it came from discipline and training, not superior technology. By the time they realized that every Sherman tank carried a radio that most of their tanks lacked, it was already too late. The German failure to recognize and adapt to America's communication advantage stands as one of World War II's greatest intelligence mistakes. Despite losing battle after battle to better coordinated American forces, they continued producing tanks designed to fight individually, while the United States fielded tanks designed to fight as teams. In the end, the invisible signals carried by the SCR-508 radios proved deadlier than the visible rounds fired by German 88mm guns. The ability to coordinate, To share information instantly and to act as a unified force mattered more than thick armor or heavy weapons. The story of the Sherman's radio advantage forever changed warfare. It established the rule that in modern battle, connection equals survival and isolation equals defeat. German troops discovered this painful reality across 3 continents, only to realize too late that the Americans had not just numbers on their side, but the crucial edge of communication technology.